Fantastic. Okay, so if you have something that is going to be just a burning question that you want to stop me on, I will check in with you regularly. But if there is something, definitely put it into the chat or just, kind of speak up and interrupt me. Don't feel like you need to wait, but I will do regular pauses to make sure that we're covering everything that you need to have covered. All right, so we're going to just launch right into this hiring, right? So the title of this is how to hire, train, and retain good employees. So the first one is hiring. And what we need to recognize is that the problem with most hiring experiences is that it comes from a place of fear and uncertainty. Now, from my experience, and I'll just introduce myself very quickly, I'm Kelly Eikenberry. For those of you who don't know, I have been a small business coach for the last 13 years, and I have mainly worked with small business owners and their teams. And a lot of the information I'm going to share with you today is not necessarily information that I have learned from either being the leader or coaching leaders, but rather from the employees and what it is that they tell me that they want from their leaders. And so most of this information is driven by the employee perspective, not necessarily mine or a theory in a book. But when I talk with owners, what I often find is that they're experiencing a lot of fear and uncertainty when it comes to hiring. They're afraid they're not going to get the right fit. They're afraid it's not going to be a good fit with their culture. They don't know if the person is even going to show up. And so that's the reality today. And what I want to start with is let's just get real about hiring and retaining. If I were giving this presentation about 3 years ago, it would be a completely different presentation. And that's why I say let's get real about it. Because in the job market today, it's basically a shuffling act. It's like you're playing with the same cards. There's not a lot of new people coming into the job market, and that's the reality. And so as owners, we have to be spot on when it comes to how we treat the employees, how we engage them, how we build loyalty with them so that they are wanting to stick around. Because even the thing that motivates the working market today is not the same thing that was motivating 3 years ago. In many cases, 3 years ago, they were motivated by growth opportunities and money. Now, most of them are motivated by quality of life. And whatever that quality of life is, it's our job as the leaders to determine or to find out what that quality of life is. Because if there is an employee who is, let's say, unhappy with the work schedule or the team dynamic, they can walk out the door and within a few hours, if they want to find work, they will find work. There are so many job openings that's the reality. And so keep that in mind as we go through all of this information, is that we have to focus on not the ideal work environment, but the reality of it. And thankfully, again, I have worked with clients through the last 3 years pretty consistently. And again, that's where a lot of this information comes from, is I know why employees are leaving and I know why they're staying. And that's the information that I'm going to share with you today. So the solutions when it comes to your role as the leader is to hire for fit, both culturally and job skill wise, to be very clear about the roles, to be clear about the responsibilities, and to have a process in which you follow. So in order to do all of those things, the first thing that you've got to do is clarify your company core values. This is different than your mission statement. It's different than your vision statement. This is something that you could put on your wall and you live it, you breathe it. This is what you want your team culture to really produce for your customers. And these are some examples from real legit companies. This is not something that I made up. I have helped companies create this, but this is something that if you have not done, you need to do it. And it's going to play a role in the hiring process, the retention process, the training process. This is going to be a piece of information that you live and breathe by, because it's going to be the driving force behind everyone within your team. So how many of you have identified a very short and sweet bullet pointed list of core values, similar to what this is, with just a show of hands? Some of you have, some of you haven't. I'm telling you, this is step one. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200 if you have not done this. And a few tips and tricks to create your own is to not overthink it. You are the leader. You know what you stand for. You know what you want your team to feel. You know what your customers, what you're wanting to give to them. And ideally, you're keeping this list to 5 or 7 bullet points. Very short and sweet. The next thing that you must absolutely do is to clarify the characteristics and the attributes of the person you want. If you're able to find some synergy, again, some fit with the type of person that you are hiring, it doesn't matter what their skill set is, because that's the next thing that comes into play. Most of the owners that I have worked with in the past have gone the skill set route first. They come up with, here's what I need the person to do, and they completely skip this part. But this again will take, this will basically be a guide to team trainings, to team outings, how people show up together. Because if you can imagine not using this as a bit of a litmus test and hiring from this place, you're possibly going to wind up having someone who comes into your realm and not have those characteristics or attributes that you want. So it's like the lemon. You're going to have 5 great team members, and then you're going to have this one person who doesn't agree with any of these. Wouldn't you rather know up front that they are not a fit, that they do not agree with these things? And that's okay. It just simply means that there's another company out there that will be a better fit for them. So again, these are just some examples of what current clients have actually put into place during their process. And when you can clarify the characteristics and attributes of the person, or if you think of an ideal employee that you already have, write down why they're ideal. You don't have to try to create this on your own. If you have somebody that you highly respect, what are their characteristics? What is it that you're respecting about the person they are? And just jot down some thoughts on that. This is not rocket science. Do not complicate this. This is something that if you carved out, 30 minutes, 45 minutes of time, even some of you right now, if you're jotting down ideas, you could have this completed before we're even done with this workshop. We're going to use this again in each of these pieces, because when you look at retaining really good teams and employees, and for those of you who put in the chat box that you wanted to create team environments or be a better leader, imagine having the majority of them with these kind of characteristics, where everyone is coming from the same foundational place, and then everyone is bringing different skill sets to the table. All right, now we get into role and responsibility. You've got to clarify why you're hiring their role, not necessarily why you're hiring the person, but what role do they play? And here's a handful of roles that are typically found within a company. And as you look at this list, you're probably going to recognize some of them are absolutely in opposition. The fire starter is totally in opposition of the nurturer, but they need each other. When you have a team that you're creating and they recognize their role that they play within the company, then you're able to start generating appreciation within the team rather than dissension, meaning the nurturer is going to think that their way is the right way. The fire starter is going to think that their way is the right way. And then you're going to be in the middle trying to come behind the 8 ball to explain why you need both of them. When you start out up front, the role you're going to play within our company is finisher. We have producers out there. Their strength is not to finish. Their strength is to find new business. We need you to come alongside them and be able to pick up everything that they're producing, communicate with them, and then finish it. There will be tension, there will be differences of opinion, but when you can lay it out like that and bring everybody together with the roles that they're playing, then you're setting yourself up for more successful communication in the long run. All right, we're going to look at one more slide and then I'm going to stop for some questions. All right, when it comes to their responsibilities, I often I'll receive an email from a client who says, hey, here's my job posting. What do you think? Can you give me some feedback? And it's a laundry list of 10 to 20 items, everything from they need to be able to multitask and detail oriented. They need to be a people person and task oriented. You're looking for a diamond in a haystack. And when it comes to identifying their responsibilities, your job as the leader is to identify their top priorities. First and foremost, is their priority to take care of the people in one way or another, or is their priority to take care of the task at hand? Are they getting things done? Or are they making sure that people are happy? When you're identifying what that priority is first, and then creating a job responsibility list for what that priority is, again, you're setting yourself up for success, not only in the training and the engagement, which is the retention piece, but you're also identifying this to the rest of the team. Their priority is not yours necessarily, right? So you're able to then, again, clearly identify for the rest of your team why you're bringing this person on and how we're going to all work together. All right, so before I move forward, because I just covered a lot of information, I want to hit pause, because if I don't do a good job of helping you implement these things and help you solve this piece of it, the next 2 pieces are going to be very difficult. So we're going to hit pause here, and I would love to either see your questions in the chat room or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask me what it is that is most pressing for you.
I guess I can say something. I'm Melissa. I'm with 5 Star Moving. I'm in strategic alliances. And I think one of my biggest issues right now is finding the employees over the last 2 years, like you said, right at the beginning, they're not, where is their motivation? They don't seem to be money motivated. Somehow they're independently wealthy. I don't know. But so for me, I'm like, okay, how do I get these people vested? In my company, in my culture, and we have been doing a lot of work around that, trying to get it going. But that's the biggest thing that I am looking to do, is to expand upon that, so I can identify what is making them wanting to work, because it has definitely changed.
Yes, it has, absolutely. And we are going to get into that as far as the motivating piece, because even if you're hiring new people, you can start to have that conversation during the interview process, which we're going to get into. But with your current team, we'll discuss that as well, because there's things that you can do even with your current team to find that motivation. And this is a piece of it. These pieces that we just went through, whether you're in the hiring process or not, even if you have a team of one, it's important that you go through these components that we just did and put them down on paper, because they are your guiding light, so to speak. That's going to be one of the things that employees are looking for. And again, this is really coming from the employee perspective. This isn't what I have figured out over the years and have theoretically tried with owners. What I'm hearing from employees is that they want something to get behind. Again, people are sticking around in jobs because of quality of life, not because of the money. And they must have those money trees out back. I agree. They're staying because of the quality of life, and they enjoy coming to work. And so when you're able to clarify what your core values are, and everyone is working towards those or embodies those to some degree, that's what's going to keep it's not a guarantee, of course, but it's going to be something that increases the enjoyment factor. And when you can clarify for everyone what the roles and the responsibilities are, again, you're increasing your success rate at keeping the good people around. They want to know what role they play. They want to know what their responsibilities are, and they want to know what the 5 other people around the table are doing within the company. This is coming from the employees. And for companies that do not have this firmly established, it creates confusion, it creates chaos, it creates division. None of those things are what keep an employee around. And that's why we're starting with this. So whether or not you're actually in the hiring process or not, do these exercises so that you can then start rolling them out to your team. And we will talk a little bit more about that, because there are some ways to do it that can help rather than hurt, because you want to be prepared going into those conversations. And it's not an overnight fix if you're experiencing any kind of challenge within your team, but there's a lot of components that go through it. And the first thing, of course, if you are not necessarily in the hiring process right now, but you have a current team and you come up with your core values, the question to ask is, how well are you living up to those core values? Are you holding yourself to the highest standard for those core values, or are you expecting your team to be doing those perfectly when you're not? That is one of the first ways to break the foundation and to create dissension. Because if the leader is not leading by example, you cannot expect the rest of the team to. So for those of you who are looking at, how can I be a better leader? That's one of the key pieces right there. So come up with what those core values are. Not necessarily, a lot of times they are a lot of personal values that translate into it, but how is it from the company standpoint? Because the thing that I always remind my clients of is that what you're starting with here today, even if you don't have the idea to sell or an exit strategy in place for another 10 to 15 years, this is the foundation. This is the foundation. Otherwise, you're creating a company that's based solely on you, and you're very difficult to sell unless you want to keep working. But if you can create a company that has a strong core value that customers get behind, that employees get behind, then it starts to remove you as the end all be all for the company. That's one of the key pieces that a buyer coming in will look at. Are they buying the company, or are they buying you and you've built a company around you? They want the company. So even if that is a goal and it's a long-term goal, these are the kinds of things that you want to put in place so that you are developing a team and a culture that can exist without you necessarily. You're giving everyone, this is our standard operating procedure. And it starts with what we stand for and how we treat each other and the kind of people that we want to attract.
Kelly, can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
So for us, so because our business is very different than a typical chiropractic office. I mean, just visit length alone is not typical, right? 30 minutes to an hour per visit. So how do you, because by the way, the sheets, remember that we just had our Q1 meetings. I cannot thank you enough. We have grown 32% in the last 3 months alone from doing that.
Wow.
So huge. But our problem is, I'm sure we all have this problem. Me and Erica are the brand, all right? Uniqueness. How do I trust someone in this? Like, it's such a small business. I don't trust any chiropractor besides myself and my wife to do the stuff that we do from like a rehab perspective and a branding perspective. So like, how do I go about doing that to where, because it's such a small business, right? If I hire an employee and they screw up the brand, that's 33% of the business. Do you know what I mean? If there's 3 of us, how do you go about that?
Okay, so oh, I heard 2 different things: trusting other chiropractors
Mhm.
and then trusting employees to carry out your reputation.
That's the main one. Trust. The second one you just said is really the most important.
Okay, so trusting employees to carry out your reputation.
Yes.
All right, so first of all, I'm absolutely thrilled that you're using those forms. We're going to talk about them later, and I'll
It's the best
offer
thing
them
ever.
to anybody else. Absolutely fantastic, and 32% increase. Okay, so that's exciting in itself. Now, when it comes to training the brand and training the reputation and trusting that somebody is going to carry that out, this is this is a challenge. And I went through a process of interviewing. I was just checking the chat box. I went through a process recently interviewing very successful business owners and asking them, what's your experience, especially working with your team? And across the board, their biggest challenge was trusting and letting go and walking away, knowing the reputation was going to stay intact, the job was going to get done, even if they weren't there in the building physically, right? And so, first of all, you're in good company. And when I came to asking them, how did you solve that? Partly, it's kind of like at least a 2-pronged approach. The first is that they had to force themselves to back off. They had to force themselves to trust. And then as we would talk through it, one of the things that I have learned working with owners is that, again, and I've already mentioned it once, you're going to see it again in a future slide, is you must hold yourself to a really high standard. And then you must lower your expectation and standard of your team.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is not meaning that they get to just do whatever it is that they want.
Of course.
But you must recognize no one ever, anywhere, is going to take care of this like you and your wife.
No
There is
one.
no one
way.
else. And when you expect somebody else to step into that exact place that you're at, you are setting yourself up for disappointment. You're setting them up for failure. And so you must identify and accept, my standard is this. We need to lower our standard for them while still maintaining the culture, the core values, but you let them do it from their perspective. Because here's what I'll tell you, and I've seen this time and time again, because every owner that I've ever worked with, this is a challenge. I mean, this is a true challenge. And when you're able to recognize the strengths that your employees bring to the table, especially when it is cultivating a reputation that you have built, then you can come from a place of appreciation for that, and you can continue to train it. So when we look at like the quarterly review that you just did, right? One of the things that you could start incorporating into either the weekly or the quarterly or both are your core values. And you can take it a step further, right? So you have them printed out. And then what you do is you talk through each one of them with your team and you ask them, how are we showing up with each one of these? What can each one of us do better to bring this to our customer base? What can we do as a team to bring this to our customers collectively? And then when you start to engage them into that kind of a conversation, you're going to hear how they think and what they are thinking of. And when you start to understand how they think and what they're thinking of, then you start to, well, and I'm assuming it's going to be good stuff. I'm assuming it's going to be good stuff. If it's not good stuff, then perhaps there's another fit somewhere else for them. But you're still going to be able to identify that earlier in the game than when it becomes toxic or when it becomes that they're hurting your reputation, right?
Of course.
So either way, it's good. And when you start asking them those kinds of questions and you start to understand, oh, well, I would not have gone about it that way, but I really like your thinking. Yes, go with it, right? You're going to develop that trust. You're going to understand they're ready and willing to carry out the core values. They believe in them, but they're going to do it from a different way. And often that will start to generate that level of comfort that you need to let go, and yet never, ever, ever, ever become hands-off. That is one of the biggest mistakes that owners make, is that they develop this trust with some of their key employees, especially, and then they go hands-off. And the next thing you know, one of those employees has gone rogue. They start to change up how things are done, or they start to give direction, and you are circling back around to try to fix it. So do not go hands off, even when you start to recognize they're coming at this from a great angle. I love how they're coming at. I'm starting to let go. I'm starting to trust them with our process, with our reputation. Continue to have those regular check-ins like you're doing, based upon their role, their responsibilities, how they're thinking. Because when you start to get that from them, again, it's going to give you a tremendous amount of room to grow when it comes to letting go. And I have it, I think, again, in another slide where it's kind of a phrase that I go by, is that you've got to train and then trust, and then train some more and then trust, and then train some more and then trust. Because they want you to let go. They've been hired to do a job, so let them do the job. That's the argument I hear from every employee.
Yeah, then they feel like they're like little kids and they don't want to be screamed at all day long and they go nuts. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it doesn't mean that you train them once and then trust them to do the job. That's on you. You haven't trained them. Training is a repeatable process.
Of course.
It's not just a one and done.
Yeah.
And when you incorporate it into those weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever it might be, and it might be that you just pick one of your core values for each of those, and you hit it home and you explain this is what it is and how we came from it, then the team is going to start to engage differently. Because employees now are looking for quality of life. They're looking for the enjoyment factor. They're looking for somebody to recognize they have a brain. Let me use it.
Of course.
So when you start to ask them, when you start to incorporate some of their ideas, again, you're going to understand how they're thinking, and you'll be able to let go a little bit better.
Awesome.
That helpful?
No, that was really great. But yeah, thank you again for the sheets. Like I said, those were we're going to use those forever.
Wonderful. I'll send you a bill.
Erica, you can pay. The other half of my company's in here. She can pay for that.
Awesome. So for those of you who I've used it in a number of different workshops that I've done. It's the planner that I've created after 13 years of working with owners. I'd be happy to send it all out to you because it is more of I would have to say, a team communication guide, not just a planner. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I mean, just the aspect of being able to see something on paper in a very structured manner. I mean, when we write our financial goals, I mean, and any all the like intricate details about it, like new patients, retention, and turnover rate. I mean, we literally, I didn't realize like how bad we were crushing those goals. And then when you see it on paper, you get motivated. You're like, oh wow, this is like a steamrolling snowball down the hill. And I mean, we use it for everything. I use it for my side business that's not Axon. I use it for it's great. You know, I use it for Erica to not kill me at night. Like it's great.
Fantastic. Glad you're still alive. All right, fantastic. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. And for those of you who would like it, I'd be happy to share it with you as well. Okay, any other questions before we move forward, or anything that you would like me to go more in depth on that we haven't already? Okay, we can always come back to this if something comes up for you, but let's move on. So once you have these things, you're pretty much going to have your job description. And when I don't have an example of it right here, but I could email it out to you if you would like, but it's really simple. Your job description starts out with, if you are a person who has these characteristics, right? So you're starting out with helping them identify if they're going to be a fit for you and your company. So you start out with the characteristics. If you are looking for, so 2 different questions, right? And you can kind of play around with the wording to see how you like it, but you could start out with, if you're a person who shows up early and stays late, who is a lifelong learner. I have who is that? I can't tell. Melissa, my cat, I had to lock the door so I wouldn't have my little cat.
Have you seen the meme where it says how to prepare for a Zoom meeting? The cat's taped to the wall. I have 3 of them. It's impossible.
Yes. Well, this is the bonus of working from home sometimes, right? Okay. So sorry, I digress. All right. Starting out the job description, the job posting with, if you are a person who, or if you are looking for a company who believes friendly competition brings out the best in people, keep reading. All right. So again, job descriptions have changed because the employee market has changed. People want to be spoken to. They want to be heard. They want to be acknowledged for who they are, what they're looking for. And so when you start out the job posting or the job description with either, we are a company who believes in this. This is what we stand for. If you like that, keep reading. If you're a person who, keep reading. The role we're looking for is a fire starter. The responsibilities are you may get fewer candidates, but you will get higher quality candidates. And in some cases, if you're just needing bodies, trim this down. Again, the employee market, there are not hundreds of employees out there searching for something. It's the craziest thing that any of us have probably ever seen in the world of hiring. And so make it easy and make it attractive for them to put in their application. So that's how you go ahead.
Kelly, hey, Yolanda here. I just want to break in and say that I accidentally did exactly what you're describing about 1.5 years ago. I got tired of posting, the canned job postings, and I just really took some time and I dug deep and wrote really what you're describing as a job application, and I put it out on my Facebook page, not really knowing what kind of a feedback that I would get. And I had somebody from my circle who it spoke to, and that was 1.5 years ago, and she's in the room with me now. I have her listening in because now we built our team from a team of 2 to now we're a team of 5.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah, I'm only sharing that because if you're struggling to find the right people, guys, the canned job postings, get rid of them and dig deep and put something out there and post it in your own circle, because the person that you already know and you know their work ethic and all of that, they might be looking for your job and you guys just haven't connected at that level yet.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And thank you for sharing your experience. I'm so glad that it worked out. And I love that you said I got fed up with. So did I. I mean, I'm the one who's supposed to be helping these owners. I was like, what we're doing is not working. We need to go back to, we need to circle the wagons. And that's exactly what we did. And you're right. Put it out to your current network. So promoting your job opening. So many people will just put it on Indeed or put it on some kind of a service for resumes. The reality is exactly what was just shared. You most likely already know a person who knows the person who would be a fantastic fit. And so you put it out and you have your current team share it if they believe in your company, which again, I'm going to hope that they do. You put it out to your network. You know, B&I brought all of us together. Go to your weekly meeting and ask them, can I share this with you? And would you continue? Would you move it forward? Would you put it out? We all know a ton of people and they know us. And so share it with your network. Of course, online job sites, and there's association job sites. There's all kinds of different places that you can put it out and get a cold lead, but definitely promote it to your current market, whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on Facebook. You can email it with a personal message of, you know, hey, we're hiring, and it could go to peers, family and friends, vendors. Don't forget about your vendors, because if they're your vendor, they're vendors of a lot of other people in your industry, and they might know somebody who is not happy where they're at because of the culture, but really good employee. They might put a bug in the ear of somebody else. Not that you need to go stealing somebody on purpose, but vendors hear a lot of chatter when they're going around visiting all the companies. So think about those kinds of opportunities when it comes to promoting your job opening. And again, most people have not thought about promoting a job opening because we've not encountered a situation like we have now. And so think about your marketing skills. Think about where you can put this out. And the other tip is to always be hiring. Always promote that you have an opening, even if you don't. Because if you continue to put it out there and do it maybe, 3 or 4 times a year, even if you don't have an opening, if you are scaling your business and you are seeing success, then if you find the right person who says, yeah, I would love to come work for you, then you can actually have that opportunity prior to when you need them. And this is always one of those really difficult things to figure out is, do I hire or do I generate the cash flow in order to pay the person? Or do I, the chicken and the egg, right? It's very difficult and there's no science to it. But if you find the right person and they're able to take on responsibilities that are going to allow you to produce more, your producer to produce more, or perhaps they are the producer, they'll pay for their job. And so always, always, always continue to be hiring. All right, create an interview process. When it comes to the interview process, this is what it's a good guide, and then you can customize it to how you like. Start off with just a phone conversation, and during the phone conversation, I like to cover the things that are the absolute necessities in order for the person to do the job. For example, I work with a number of trades organizations. Most of them need their employees to not only be able to have a valid license, but to have a vehicle that works and is reliable so that they can actually show up to the job wherever it might be in the city. If you have the phone interview, you can identify those critical areas. I need you to have a vehicle. Do you have a vehicle? Do you have a license that is in good standing? Are you able to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning? Because the role of this job is to open the office. No, I have to drop my last kid off at 8:30. Okay, well, that's a problem. You might be a good fit for another position we have, but it won't be for this one. And then you can determine whether or not to continue the conversation with them. But it's better to find those things out up front. You can even put them in the job posting if you wanted to. Then you move them into an in-person interview. And there's lots of different interview questions. I have some ideas that I could pass along to you as well. But when it comes to interview questions, I think it's really critical for you as the owner to ask some things, but then depending upon the nature of the position, the more important the position is to the reputation, to customer involvement, to team involvement, it's a really good idea to not just have your own perspective on it, but to engage somebody from a third-party perspective. That might be your team. It might be somebody outside of your team, but to get somebody else's perspective, not on their work experience, but on who they are as a person. Are they going to be a good fit? Are there things that you ought to be aware of beforehand? And it's not necessarily to rule them out, but it's to try to generate some of those things up front that you want to know about, rather than getting a month into the job or even 2 weeks into the job and saying, oh my gosh, I'd had no idea that this person was this way. And so find someone who's very intuitive, who is a people person, to be part of that third party. And remember that sometimes, depending upon the culture of your team, they are a good asset and in as far as the interview process, and in some cases they're not. If you are in a position where you are needing to change your culture, and that is your goal with new hires, sometimes the current team will take a position of being threatened. And if they are the ones then interviewing that person, it's not going to work well, because they're going to come to the table almost shutting them down before they get started. And so depending upon where you're finding yourself, hopefully most of you are finding yourself with a really good culture to begin with. But if you do have someone or a culture that you're trying to shift, keep that in mind. Your third party may need to be coming from the outside. I participate as the third party, depending upon the position, with some of the companies that I work with. And it's always from a place of just getting to know the person and what prompted them to fill out the application. Why do they want to go to work for this company? And often when you just simply ask that question and you have somebody who is very knowledgeable about you, about your company, about what you're wanting to build, and they just simply ask that question, well, what prompted you to put in an application here? Why do you want to work here? You're going to get a different, the third party will get a different response than the owner, because they're not trying to impress me. They're trying to impress the owner, and they're trying to show up the way the owner wants them to in some cases. And so that is really the main reason for that third party, is just to see, is the person showing up consistently across the board with not only me, but also this other person, and getting some insight there. So again, create some kind of a third party. And then some people will use assessments, whether it's a strengths-based assessment, a communication, a behavioral. We use the DISC assessment and the values assessment often. Some people choose not to, that's fine. But again, if you can gain more insight into what are their natural strengths, what are their communication preferences, then again, it's not necessarily a selection tool, but it will set you up as the leader to know this probably is how they learn. This is how they prefer to communicate. I need to tighten my game up when I put them into a training process. So that's what those assessments can provide. And if you don't have something, you want something, let me know. I know a lot of them out there, and so I can help give you some guidance on those if you would like. The working interview, I think, is really, really critical. Now, some people can fly through those first 4 steps and make a pretty quick decision on whether or not they want to offer the opportunity of a working interview to a person or not. Sometimes you just know and you look at their experience, or because they're coming from a referral place and you trust them and that referral has already vouched for them and has said, oh my gosh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. You might fly through those first 4 steps. So then it's the working interview. And this goes back to, what is the priority? What is the priority for this position? If the priority is customer service and how they sound over the phone and how they handle customers, don't ask them to sit down and do some kind of detail-oriented exercise. You're shooting yourself in the foot there. Get them on the phone, set it up with some of your colleagues or potentially some of your clients who are also colleagues who understand what you're doing, and ask them, can I have them call you and walk you through something to prepare you for an appointment? And then have you give me some feedback on how that went. How did they come across on the phone? And do it with a few people, right? When it comes to a technical job, they're either going to prove they can do the technical job or not, right? So with a mechanical shop, it's pretty dang simple. You give them a job that they say that they know how to do. You track how long it takes them. You track the quality of the work, and you track their communication, and you decide whether or not it's a good fit. So depending upon what you're hiring for, come up with some kind of a creative working interview. One that I was involved with that was actually rather fun for me was a sales position. A company was hiring a salesperson who really had the responsibility of being able to cultivate conversation. That's what they mainly wanted. They wanted to know, can this person cultivate a conversation and then convert it into a next step? And so I got to go to lunch, and it was 4 people. So there were 2 of us outsiders, and then it was the person who was going to be hiring, and it was the candidate. And we staged it that the person hiring got a phone call that was urgent and had to step away from the lunch table. And I, as you know, for those of you, especially for those of you who know me, I can be rather talkative. I can carry almost any conversation. My brother has joked that he could say, go get in a room, padded white walls, which I don't know what that insinuation is, but he said you could carry on a conversation. I probably could. So my role, though, was not to be the conversation starter. My role was to be pleasant and kind, but see if this person was able to cultivate that conversation. And so you can come up with all kinds of creative ways, depending upon what the priority of the position is. Because when she proved that, yes, she could cultivate the conversation and then move it into a next step, even, she was a great fit. They could train her to do some of the other things because you create a process for that training. And they were very confident with, this is the priority. This is why we're hiring the position. And that only developed her confidence to go out and do a better job with it. Because then they came behind her and they built a team around her, that team approach, right? As well as training her to do the other aspects of the job. And then the first 90 days. Some people, it's a 30-day process. I like a 90-day process, especially for key positions. The critical thing about this, and what we're going to get into when it comes to the training, is that you must have a training schedule during the first 90 days, and then it's broken down week by week. So if you want to shorten the 90 days, that's fine. Again, every company is a little different, so utilize what works for you. But have milestones that the person is working towards and that you are being held accountable for. what does that 90 days look like? What are the milestones that they need to hit, that they need to understand, that give them a roadmap basically for those 90 days, so that they know that you're the person who's going to be training them, or somebody else within the office is going to be training them, or they're going to get it on some kind of video training system, or some of you work with your own agency, but have a bigger company. So are some of those pieces added into it? Give them a roadmap for those first 90 days and show them how to win. Show them what milestones they get to hit and show them what it looks like, so that they know that it is working. They know there is success and there is confidence built in that, and there is trust going both ways. Because to Nick's question earlier, I get it a lot from the owners. How do I know I can trust them? Well, guess what? I talk to a lot of employees. I probably talk to more employees than I do owners because of the nature of the work. And I hear from employees, how can I trust them? How can I trust the owner? So keep that in mind, please. This is a two-way street. And when you are able to generate trust with them, they will produce better work for you and they will be a better team player. Any questions about the interview process before we move on? Okay, the offer.
I have a question, Kelly, real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Noel.
So on the in-person part of the interview where you're doing like actual questions or like, I don't know, I've heard a lot of people lately suggest these kinds of questions, like give me a scenario in your previous work where you did da 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 da. Or do you recommend that kind of interview style, or like another kind of interview style, just like where have you worked before, what's your best skill, like yada yada?
Oh, those to me are the canned. It kind of goes along with the canned job description. So my approach, and it's a little off the wall. I will ask them, what's your mom's favorite flower? Or if they happen to be married and they were wearing a ring, right? Or if they indicate their kid, their spouse, whatever, where's your spouse's favorite place to eat? What do you like to do on the weekend? If they're able to answer those kinds of questions, especially the what's your mom's favorite flower, it shows they've actually been paying attention to some of the most important people in their lives. If they're not able to answer that question and get really awkward with it, ask them, try to switch it up, throw them a bone. Well, what about so-and-so's favorite movie, right? Whatever that might be. The reason being is that, especially if they are going to be any kind of customer facing, which I mean, every single person here should position your company as a sales organization, a sales and customer service organization, because ultimately, if you don't have sales and customer service, you don't have a company. And you want to find, from my perspective, at least part of the interview questions need to include that sales and customer service focus. And if you can identify that a person has actually paid attention to the people in their lives, you will know then, okay, we like to pay attention to each other as well, right? So it's a little off the wall. The other question that I like when it comes to their actual work experience is not necessarily tell me about a situation when you accomplished X, Y, or Z, but rather when you and your boss disagreed, what was the disagreement? And how did it get resolved? Or did it? Or is that why you're here? Right? So you can't necessarily go that far, but you can ask them, when did you and your team disagree? Someone on your team disagree? And how was it resolved? You can ask them, when I call your references, What are they going to say? And you can even look at their references and call the person out by name. So when I call Bob, what is Bob going to tell me was your greatest strength? Now, remember, I am not an HR person. So I know that there are some parameters that you must stay within in regards to personal information and really what the oh my gosh, the referral, the person who they put on their resume, right? What they're going to say. And in most cases, they don't say much, but what you're really wanting to do, whether you wind up calling them or not, is to find out from the candidate what they are going to say. And when you're interviewing them, pay attention to their body language, pay attention to their nervousness or their confidence. So those are the kind of questions that I tend to go towards. But if there is something really specific, go ahead and ask it. You know, if there's something really specific to their experience or their skill set, go ahead and dive into that. Is that helpful? Awesome. Some people prefer taking them to lunch, again, depending upon the role that they're going to be playing and the position that they're going to fill. Some people like to meet them over lunch and see how they treat the waiter or the waitress and how they communicate with them, or do they thank them, those kinds of things. So again, what's the priority? What is it that you're looking for? What kind of characteristics do you want to see in that person? Now, here's the other thing when it comes to the interview and you're in person with them. And so I'm glad you asked this question because I completely skipped over it. You have your list of core values at this point. You do not go into any interview process without your list of core values. And that's what you lead with. So when they come in, you welcome them, you have your core values and you have a sheet for them. And you put it in front of them and you have your 5, 6, 7 bullet points. And so for example, let's just go back to the example. If we were to use this and you put it in front of somebody, you're going to say, you know, can't wait to learn more about you. For right now, though, I want to go through our core values and what we really stand for as a company, because one of the things we look for is to be a fit on both sides of the table. So we want you to know what we stand for, and let me go through those. We show up. Here's what that means. And you give a little blurb. We follow through. Here's what that means. We believe in friendly competition, blah, 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 right? So you walk through them and you give them a little bit of an example, and then you ask them, which one of these stands out most to you? You want to, again, get them talking from that place so that you're understanding who it is you're bringing in. And then you can always default to 2 of my most favorite phrases. Tell me more about that. Right? Tell me more about that. Or what do you mean by? And when you can follow or pretty much lead that way within an interview, and you keep them talking, tell me more about that. What do you mean by? Is there a situation that you have found yourself in? How did it go? You can potentially drive your entire interview with just the conversation that comes from the core values. So I'm glad you asked that, because this is something you can, from my perspective, just build it into your interview process and start with it, because if they are not able to tell you any of them resonate, or if they say, oh, I really actually don't like competition, that's kind of scary for me. Okay, well, that we're probably not a good fit for you, because every Friday at lunch, we go in the back and we have a dartboard competition. And sometimes people are betting this, that, or the other thing. if that's going to be uncomfortable for you, perhaps we're not the best fit. But they need to know it, right? They need to know how it shows up. And if you weed people out because of fit prior to them starting, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. All right. Any other questions about the interview process or anything along those lines? All right. So the offer, what they need to say yes, because again, this is an employees market, not necessarily the employers. The offer includes a lot of different things. Clearly, you have to look at your numbers to see base pay, commission, bonuses, benefits. Let's talk about benefits. And I know there's someone here who is a benefits provider. And so we've connected. And if you're looking for the traditional benefit package that most companies can offer, then it's definitely something that you can incorporate, even if you don't have a large budget. And that's one of the misconceptions, I guess, about benefits, the traditional kind, is that you have to have a huge budget in order to implement them. The reality is that you don't. There are professionals who can help you add some things in at a lower cost. And so if you're interested in that, or if you're wanting to look into it, I can connect you. So just let me know. But you can also get creative with your benefits and your bonuses. So again, this will help you identify what they are motivated by. So during that interview process, during the whole conversation about what would it take for you to say yes, and don't hesitate to ask a person that. What would it take for you to say yes to joining our team? What are you going to work for every day? You can ask those kinds of questions, I believe. You can ask them, why are you getting up and going in? And when they start to tell you, well, it's because, I want to make money towards college education, towards this vacation, towards my 20-year anniversary trip to Ireland, whatever the case might be. They're working towards something. And when you can identify what it is that they're working towards, and then come alongside them, and in some way, shape, or form, create an offer that supports what it is that they're working towards, then you're creating that place of enjoyment for them. You're creating and helping them, which for most people increases their motivation to come into work and do a good job and to support you. And this is a great place to be able to ask it. What do you need to say yes? Why are you even searching for a job? If we can at all help you, we possibly will. So I've had people attach bonuses to house cleaning, to gym memberships, but it's not because the owner thinks that's a great benefit. It's because the employee has told the owner, oh, I would love to have my house cleaned. Yeah, you hit this and I'll pay for a house cleaning every month. And they're ecstatic. There's a couple people on here who could probably speak to this more. They went to their team. They wanted to provide snacks. They asked what kind of snacks. They provided those type of snacks, and the team was speechless. Like, are you kidding me? Really? Wow. So it doesn't even have to be something huge. It can be minor, basic little things. But when you show that you have heard what it is that they are wanting, what it is that is going to increase that quality of life for them when they're at work, and you can meet that need, you are then creating motivation, or at least coming alongside it, and you are generating loyalty, because people want to go to work at a place they enjoy now, not necessarily for the money or the climbing of the ladder. And it's in often the little things that can help generate that and create that for them. So even if you don't have, again, if you have a current team, but you're not in the hiring process, you can still have that conversation with them. What are you working towards? What is it that would be beneficial? If we can come alongside and meet that, here you go. The snack thing, I'm telling you, is a reality. Another office got sparkling water instead of just bottled water. The staff was ecstatic. So it's the little things, people. It's the little things. All right, so get creative with what those bonuses and the benefits can be. And that can be done either in that interview process or with your current team. So let's go into training. And I'm watching the time, and I intentionally spent a lot of time in the hiring process, because when you can set that up with that process, then you can almost seamlessly move into the training piece and the retention piece, because you now have a foundation in which to work from. And whether it is in the hiring process, or if you go through those same steps with a current team, you'll be able to identify what do they need training on, who needs to get the training or give the training, and then how are you retaining those current team members. So even if you're not in the hiring process, you can use components of what we just went through in these next two pieces, because this is all about building relationships. And so when it comes to even that planner, that guide that Nick mentioned, this is factored into that. And so it is a communication guide with your team to help identify additional training they need, to identify what they believe is working well, what is not working well. And then you can factor that into this. And again, train, then trust, train, then trust. It is a cyclical process. It is not a one and done. And so when it comes to the training component, here are some key pieces. You absolutely must write it down. Covered that during the 90-day, but this communication guide, this planner that I have created, it's broken into a quarterly basis. And when you're able to write it down on a quarterly basis, you're creating a process for them in which to follow, and you're able to schedule it. When you're able to schedule it, everybody knows what's coming. Employees hate not knowing what's coming. They need you to be consistent. They need to know what they're measured against. We're going to go into delegating a little bit in the next slide, so I'm going to skip over that right now. They need to be measured against the role and responsibilities. So when you walk them through the interview process, you clearly identified the role and responsibilities they're playing. Those should be simple enough to bring out on a regular basis with them, weekly, monthly, quarterly, not in a formal review process, but in a check-in. And you want to continue to present a consistent message to them. Remember, this is your role. Remember, these are your responsibilities. And when you have that created for your entire team, and there is tension among the ranks, which there will be, then you're able to put that down in front of them. Well, remember, their role is the fire starter. Your role is the nurturer. I cannot treat you fairly. I cannot have the same expectations for you. The customer can't, but we need to come together. We need to collaborate so that they're able to do their role as effectively as possible, and you are too. And then you're able to collaborate on that solution and bring them together, because you are clearly identifying and reestablishing what those roles and responsibilities are. We covered the raise your standard, lower theirs, and then rinse and repeat. When it comes to delegation, here's some key pointers. Show them how to win. If you have a show and tell business, show them how to win. You need to have things written down. You need to have a process created for each thing that you're going to ask them to do. Always include the document that shows them what it is to win. So for example, I used auto mechanic earlier, and this is an example that we did. here's the process of how to check someone in, right? So here's the process. Here's what the advisor up front is going to do. And here's an example of a really good story. That's what they call it. They write out a story of what the customer is experiencing. They use the customer words. They don't put it in their brain and kick something else out. They use verbatim phrases and words from the customer. And then it goes to the technician, and the technician diagnoses it, and the technician adds to the story. And we have a really good example of what that looks like and why it's good. And then it goes back to the advisor, and the advisor gets on the phone with the customer to sell the work. And so in that process, we have an example of a really good customer intake form with those stories. Now, not only do they know how to win, but you have a training piece of material. Because if you train to that on a regular basis, you are able to measure their success, what they need to do better, how potentially to make it even better. So it adds so many different elements into the whole training and retention and even measuring them and their success and supporting them. So if they say, that sounds great, but you never told me. Okay, my bad. Now I'm telling you. So go do this for a week, and then we're going to check it again. And that's what the established checkpoints means. When you are in the process of training, which is ultimately delegation, you must establish checkpoints. So in that scenario, we would say, here's an example of how, what it looks like to win. Here's why. Now go try it for a week. And then we're going to pull 5 of your orders and we're going to look through them. And I'm going to give you feedback. And then I want you to give me feedback on what I did not go into enough, or what you need additional training on. That's where the two-way debrief comes in. Employees, they're by nature fearful. Number one, they want to do a good job, and they're fearful they're not doing a good job. When you can remove that fear and let them know, we're going to come to the table at the end of the week, we're pulling 5 of your orders, we're going to go through them together to see what I need to explain a little bit more, to show you what you are doing really well and identify where you might need more training. Then you're establishing an open communication with them rather than every time that they ask for a meeting with you, they feel like they're getting in trouble and being sent to the principal's office. That is not going to create this engagement that you're looking for. It's not going to create this enjoyment factor when it comes to where am I working. And so these are some tips for delegating. Any questions on them? Okay, so the last piece, and we've already covered a lot of it, is the retention piece. Hopefully by now you have a really good idea of how to retain people. Because if you're using a foundation, and if you're going to implement some of those steps from the foundation, you're going to increase your chances of retaining good employees. But here are a handful of bullets that, again, are kind of key components about the retention piece. Train and trust, which really means let them do their job, but you must show them the way. Regular huddles. You want everybody rowing in the same direction, right? You cannot hire somebody and think that they're just going to be able to go about it on their own. You need to continue to be the leader, or you need to establish who the leader is within the company who's going to be conducting these huddles, and what kind of authority do they have, so that everybody is coming together on a regular basis. Remember, they're looking for relationship, That doesn't necessarily mean a tremendous amount of communication, but they want to know what to expect. And they want to know that everybody's moving in the same direction. The team integration. In many cases, it seems common sense, but I'll remind you that common sense is not common. My common sense is different than yours. So you don't want to take it for granted. You don't want to assume anything. Remember that when you are bringing someone on board, or when you are looking to retain good employees, you must factor in team integration. How are you creating not only team building type of experiences with them, but team bonding experiences? Are they coming together to solve problems? And so when it comes to that team integration, it's not just introducing them and identifying those roles and responsibilities, right? Number one, that's a huge step in the right direction. Bringing everybody around the table to say, even from your perspective, I'm the owner. Here's my role. Here's my responsibility. And then here's everybody else's around the table. You're going to start to create that inclusion rather than feeling like they're little isolated individuals within a bigger company. So that's a really great starting point. But then it can be helping them go through some of these other pieces to say, hey, it seems like we need to come up with a solution for X, Y, and Z. Let's everybody get together around the table tomorrow at 3:00. Always give them some time to think. And from each of your respective roles, I want you to come with pros and cons of either this idea, or I want you to come with how we could solve this, what would make it easier or smoother or more productive, or whatever it is that you're looking for from each of your respective roles. And when you lay it out like that, it isn't just, hey, let's brainstorm how we can solve this. You're going to have naturally opposing opinions. So when you acknowledge that up front and you give them the direction of each individual role, come with your ideas, then they're going to be able to have a more productive conversation than if they didn't. So all of these pieces tie into the inclusion. The weekly plus check-ins. Sometimes those are weekly, sometimes those are monthly, but put it on the calendar and then stick to it. I really love weekly, even for very short amounts of time. This isn't a sit down with every employee for an hour. This is a very quick 15-minute check-in. And if you use the weekly check-in that's in this planner that I have created that I'll send out, it gives you basically the agenda. It shows you how to utilize it as a tool with them so they know what to expect and you know how to make it productive. Some people choose to do it every other week. Some people are doing it monthly, but this is all about relationship building. This is all about your guide to communicating with them so that you can check in on what's working and what's not from their own perspective. And then be very clear and consistent in your communication. I would almost argue that consistency is more important than clarity based on the feedback I get from employees. And when that is the case, and they are saying it's not consistent, this week he said this, now it's this week, and it's like we're going in a different direction. It's creating chaos, it's creating confusion. And when that starts to happen, the productivity drops, the engagement drops. They're now wondering, and they're just thinking, I'm just the messenger. I'm waiting for them to tell me what to do. And so even if that means you get to have behind the scenes conversations with somebody else, your own coach, with me, with not somebody on your team, not somebody who's even necessarily emotionally engaged in it, in order to create what is that consistent message that you're going to put out that you know you can handle and that you know you can stand by, you will start to create confidence with your team. It will create that productivity that you're looking for. And remember, you want them to trust you. So you need to behave in a trustworthy way. It's not just that you need to gain or you need to learn how to trust them. Clear, consistent communication allows them to trust you more. And it's a key piece in retention. Any questions about this or anything else that we have covered, which I think has been a lot. I always jam everything I can into an hour and a half. Well, thank you, Yolanda. I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm watching the time also. We've got about 5 minutes left, so don't check out. Wait, go back. I love it when technology gets a mind of its own and oh, it's like, look at that, huh? Okay. It finally decided which slide it wanted to be on. Okay, so what's next? First, I want all of you need to have at least one action step. Now, we covered a lot. The key is to identify the one thing you know you need to do. And I want you to write it down. There is no judgment. There's no right or wrong. There's nothing at all, but you need to write it down for yourself. And then you get to be accountable. I mean, it is one of the values of B&I, right? Accountability. And I am a coach. So there you go. Thank you, Maureen. I'm glad to hear that. Awesome. Clarifying goals. Perfect. So put those in the chat. You can't leave here unless, and I know where all of you live and breathe and work. So I'll come hunt you down and find you. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me either there with my email, or you can go to my website. And then I want your feedback. So continue with what you're putting in the chat, your first step that you're going to take, because that's really critical, just one at a time. Otherwise, you and your team will get overwhelmed, and you don't want to do that. You want to start slowly and build momentum. Do not try to do everything at once. Start slowly and build momentum with what we've covered today. Fantastic. I know there's more of you. Keep writing it in. So the last thing I want to hear from you, let's see. Is there anyone who would like to verbalize what they gained from today? I want to give you that opportunity. If there is a verbal person and you want to share with everyone, go right ahead.
Doesn't everybody worry that they're going to interrupt somebody? Because that's what I do. I'm like, oh my God, if I open my mouth, 3 other people are going to try to talk.
You'd be amazed at how little often.
I know, and we're all networkers, business owners, around customers, places, homes, and selling things. So you know what I really learned, and I think it's great actually, is that so much of this applies kind of to what I've been doing, but it applies to my current staff that will help me continue, investing in them and helping them continue doing what they need to do so that I can, like you said, take a step back. It's never hands off, but it's that working on your business instead of in your business. And it's like, okay, if I died tomorrow and the business died with it, is not a business. So
yeah, you're right. Yep.
right. I would leave something to my kid. But I am really impressed with how much information you got into such a small amount of time. I just spent 3 days in Florida with my van line. I'm an agent for Wheaton Van Lines, and I spent 3 days out there with my ops manager, and they have developed this really great training program that we use for our crew members and managers and everything. And it's fantastic, and our employees love it. And so much of that is, you just kind of condensed it. Of course, we didn't talk about hiring processes and things like that. But it really is cohesive. So just kind of keeps me going. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback. That's great. That's great. Okay, so you see this last bullet here, register for the next training. I have the date and it's going to be, I believe, at noon. I try to aim for times and days when there are no chapters meeting, which limits when that can happen, as well as being a mom with kids. In the chat box, though, I'd like to know, would you prefer A, B, or C as May's training? And the majority wins. One for each so far. That's awesome. So keep putting it in. Let me know what your vote is. And then I will continue to produce these. I've done all 3 of these before, but I just wanted to know which one is next. And then what I'll do is just build it out over the next few months of, okay, this is the first one in May, and then here's going to be one in June and the next. How did you like I had to switch to Zoom because there were some things happening in my world that were going to prevent me from showing up in person today. And I actually had to skip my BNI meeting this morning because I woke up and my face was swollen. And so Benadryl and hydrocortisone cream has worked wonders. Because this morning I thought, oh my gosh, I missed you too, Cindy. This morning I was wondering if I was even going to be able to show up here, but medication is great. I usually don't take it. So I'm glad that you were all able to switch to Zoom. Did you like this platform? Is it easier? I know that we have now expanded into Pueblo and Castle Rock, and that's quite a haul if they're looking for in-person. But if you want to, give feedback, I'd love to hear it. And if this is something that, if I've mentioned something during the workshop that you definitely want, like the planner, interview question, feedback, or ideas, then definitely let me know and shoot me an email. And so it looks like, yeah, there's going to be probably a combination. Maybe I can talk with Tracy and see about offering each of these in Zoom and an in-person option, because I agree. I like the in-person as well. So this is convenient and it works, but maybe there's room for some different possibilities there. So with that, I appreciate all of you being here. Reach out if you need help with anything, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.